All right, I want to welcome everyone to our presentation about the Academy Software Foundation today, where we are going to look back and look ahead. It's our annual keynote, where we're giving you a snapshot of where we're at and what we want to do. We have a great hour for you, including Q&A, a room that you can go to ask your questions as we go, and we will attempt to answer them either on the fly or at the end, but don't hesitate to go in, put your questions, and you can vote on them, other people's questions. There we go. So we have a subtitle, The Academy Software Foundation Accelerating. So we've done a lot in the last few years, and we'll talk about that. But first, we have a new video, and we'd like to share that with you. What you're going to see are shots of various movies where our projects, our libraries were used. Let's have a look.
Every single part of the filmmaking process is touched by software, and a lot of that software is open source software. The Academy Software Foundation exists to provide a great home for open source projects that we as an industry use every day. Whether you are a user of open source software, or an engineer, or a company that relies on open source software, we want to create the right ecosystem for you to get the most out of the open source software that you need to use.
Amazing work done by many people in our industry at all levels of visual effects and animation, using the libraries and the projects that we're going to talk about here and that we're talking about in other presentation of these two open source days. So right now in this hour, these are our presenters. Rob Bredow, chair of our board of directors and senior VP, creative director and head of ILM. Daniel Heckenberg, the chair of our technology advisory council and R&D supervisors at Animal Logic. Emily Olin, who's our director of marketing and communication for the foundation and also the automotive grade Linux at the Linux Foundation. And I'm going to do the short introduction on the background for the foundation itself. This is in reverse order, our agenda as we're going to go. Emily will follow me with Dan with the tech, and Rob at the end will give us the look forward. So the foundation. If you were here last year at the first open source day, we had just been a year old, and now we're 2 years old. We put together a timeline here to, in the one snapshot, give you and anyone in the audience who would be new to the foundation a bit of the background of where we came from. In a nutshell, it all started in the SciTech Council and an investigation that lasted nearly 2 years on the topic of open source software in our industry and what could be done about it. And at the end of it, that investigation concluded we should create a foundation. And the companies that are listed there under the August 10th, 2018 banner are the founding members. And we're forever grateful for these companies to go in, take the risk. It was more than a theoretical commitment. There were also some funding into that. They had the courage of their conviction. They came together and they created the foundation. The first project, OpenVDB, came shortly thereafter, proposed by DreamWorks, with new members that joined us. And then we had OpenColorIO, OpenEXR, OpenQ in quick succession with new members coming in. And we had our first open source day a year ago with OpenTimeline coming up as a new project and a new group of members joining. In September, we had Apple and Microsoft joining, and about that time, shortly thereafter, we reached $1 million in funding, yearly funding for our foundation, which is an important milestone because in our industry, there are many organizations that are doing a lot of good work on a voluntary basis, but they don't always have the budget. Here, when we created the foundation, having the capability to the budget to follow up on what we wanted to do is very important. And we hit that milestone just before COVID-19 hit us all in our lives, both personally and in our businesses. And so we happened to be not prepared. Nobody was prepared for COVID-19, but we had a solid base to enter into that moment in time, and we continued our work. As it turns out, the open source model is a remote collaboration model already. And so it was quite natural for us to continue working pretty much the way we had. There was a lot of disruptions in people's lives, and we slowed down a little bit, but we were able to pick the pace quite fast. And then we had a number of new members that joined us, and culminating with today, the announcement that we did this morning with Unity Technology, Conductor Technologies, and SIMT joining us. So in a nutshell, that's our history. And these are the companies that are making the foundation, that are contributing in engineering time and also in funds to make the foundation go forward. So a moment to say thank you to all of these companies. If you're working at one of those companies, thanks to you and to your organization. If your company is not listed here and you wanted to become part of the foundation, don't hesitate to contact any of us, contact me, and we'll be glad to show you how you can join. This is all also listed on our website. So in a nutshell, our mission has not changed. If you've been here with us in the last presentations, it's the same. But for anyone new, our goal is to increase the quality and quantity of open source software by adding a governance model, a legal framework, and a community infrastructure around open source in the motion picture industry. And our goals, here they are, not going to read them, but they are about providing a technical infrastructure for the development of open source software and making sure that everyone can know how to participate, that there's no mystery, and that it's very easy to come and join us. The foundation is structured this way. The Technical Advisory Council, led by Dan, is the beating heart of the foundation. This is where the engineers are. This is where the important decisions are made. And the governing board and the outreach committee are there to help the tech to do their work and to support the decision that they make. Governing board will take care of finance and legal, and outreach committee will make sure that the projects are well communicated and a lot more. Do conferences like this open source days, and Emily will talk about that. These are our 6 projects. They are listed here, and we'll talk more about them in this presentation. Each one of them has a longer presentation also as part of open source days, and they're all built on our continuous integration platform. Our activity is focused on our projects, but we have a mission to help all open source projects in our industry. And John Murtick in our group has put together the ASWF Landscape, which is a snapshot, an interactive snapshot of all the open source projects in our industry. It's on our website. I encourage you to go and see it. And today and tomorrow, as part of the open source days, this is the program that you had seen when you came and signed up. Highly encourage you to go see any of the other presentation here about our projects and other open source projects. This is the great work of Emily Olin, and I want to take the opportunity to introduce her for the next segment, where she will tell us about the news and all that we have coming up.
So thanks, David, for that intro. As David mentioned, I'm Director of Marketing and Communications for the Academy Software Foundation at the Linux Foundation. And I have been very privileged to work with many of the people attending this over the past 2 years and see the foundation really grow and our communities and our projects grow. It's very exciting for me to see how excited all of you get about it. So also, as David mentioned, today we announced 3 new members: Unity Technologies, Conductor Technologies, and SMPTE. And then earlier this year, we announced AMD and Dockyard Technologies. So we're excited to see the growth is still continuing as we bring in new members. In case you did not see it or were not on the OpenColorIO session this morning, OpenColorIO version 2 is now available, the feature complete version for download, and it has a lot of great updates to it. This is a major release that they've been working on for 3 years, involving 3 full-time developers at Autodesk, a lot of contributions and collaboration across many VFX studios, vendors, users. So it's a great announcement. Take a look, check it out. And then tomorrow we will have an announcement from OpenVDB at 10 a.m. and it's related to GPU acceleration. That's all I can say for now, but hope you can join us then. And if you do miss any of the sessions, all of these talks will be posted next week on YouTube. One of the other big initiatives that we have undertaken this year is diversity and inclusion. I think we all know that obviously it's a big issue, and it is even more so an issue within open source communities for VFX and animation. So we launched a new working group earlier this year. It's being led by or co-chaired by Carol Payne at Netflix and Rachel Rose at ILM. And we have had a ton of great input and participation from many members, studios across the board. And Carol and Rachel will also be talking a bit about this in the session afterwards. So I'll let them go into all the details about the goals, but we really encourage everybody to please, get involved, participate. We'd love to hear suggestions and feedback. But open source communities, there's no barrier to entry. Anybody can get involved. It's available for everybody. So we really want to be a catalyst for change to encourage everybody to participate. And now I'm going to turn it over to Daniel.
Thank you, Emily. I will just grab control. So it has been a very active and busy time. As David introduced, we've found that in spite of the many upheavals that the last 6 months or the last year, in fact, have brought to all of our lives, the processes and projects of the Academy Software Foundation have provided real resilience to the activities that we're involved in. And all of our projects have been able to continue forward with great progress and success. I'm going to highlight a little bit of the activities that happen in and around the TAC, and specifically things that have happened that we've been able to initiate within the last year, and particularly 6 months. And following the presentation I give, Rob will be providing some interesting details on the path forward. So we'll go through our projects a couple of times in the next sessions. Yeah. So one initiative that we really took on following through in the last 6 months was to take the model that we've been successfully using to develop technology outside of the scope of any of our individual projects. You saw on the slide earlier that our structure for the Technical Advisory Council is one which brings together all of our projects and allows us to solve problems and decide on policies and direction that can benefit all of those projects. So we've taken in the extra step of spinning up a number of working groups, which allow us to take on other problem areas which are outside of the scope of any of our current projects. You'll see there that we have 4 working groups currently active, and Emily introduced the Diversity Inclusion Working Group, which has been doing very good work in that domain. In the more technical areas, or the more strictly technical areas, of course, we've had the CI Working Group from the very beginning of the activities of the Academy Software Foundation, and that's the model that we've used for these other working groups as well. We have a very active working group looking into universal scene description and how we can add and support that project, which obviously is an independent project that is managed by Pixar, and a working group established to help our members and the broader industry, and particularly also, of course, the vendors that are associated in our software stack on the transition from Python 2 to Python 3, which is a problem that's been occupying many of us over the last year. So to dive into our projects now, of course, we have 6 very strong and active projects, differing in age and in their profiles. Over the last year, we've been able to successfully involve the Academy Software Foundation in the Google Summer of Code project. And in fact, we've had 3 students active over this period for OpenEXR, OpenTimelineIO, and OpenQ. And that's been a very valuable collaboration. Each of the students has done very good work, and it's something we hope to continue in the future. And indeed, a model that we're looking at ourselves as far as good ways of establishing communities and supporting and extending those communities around our projects. So to speak a little bit of each of the projects in turn, and I'll note that all of our projects do have birds of a feather sessions within the Open Source Days program. So please treat this as a quick introduction, as a hook to go in and find more detail and connect with those projects directly. So OpenVDB was our first project accepted and adopted in the foundation. And I would really like to just leave another underline or underscore for the very exciting announcement they'll be making tomorrow. So please do join that session. It'll be worth your while. OpenColorIO is another excellent poster for the broadening of support and processes that the Academy Software Foundation has been able to assist and provide for a well-established project. So actually being able to bring together the resources and the different studios and companies to allow OpenColorIO version 2, a huge effort to come together on a schedule that was established essentially last year for release now. That's a wonderful effort. Congratulations to all involved. OpenQ is one of our more recently joined or incubated projects, and sits a little bit apart from many of our other projects in terms of being a whole system that works with distributed components, unlike a software library. Once again, its involvement in the foundation has really been vital to extend the use cases of this software, to allow other studios and technology providers to incorporate it in their stack as a solution that can work for a broader range of companies. And the participation in that project, as you can see from the contributors mentioned there, brings together those different groups with different backgrounds in a way that certainly isn't possible for any in-house or proprietary technology, which is of course the history of many of our projects. OpenEXR is of course in some ways the grandfather of open source projects within our industry. Please note the exciting new logo there, which perhaps, what's the word I'm looking for? The old logo was old and it provided a visual cue as to the sort of the date of origin of the project. New logo, of course, elides that a little bit, but is a very nice representation of the functionality of the project, and is a good thing to move forward, particularly as OpenEXR itself takes on a more modern face. So one of the key contributions that Google Summer of Code project has made has been able to support some of the modernization efforts on that project, specifically recognizing that as a large project that provides different services, that some modularization of its libraries was desirable. And secondly, modernization of the code and software that's used inside of the project. So all of those things are going into OpenEXR now and will culminate with OpenEXR 3 coming later this summer. It has a very broad range of contributions, once again, across a wide variety of both industry and studio developers. OpenTimelineIO is one of our newer projects. This has been contributed by Pixar, of course, and sits as a very good solution to a problem that has been challenging, again, many of our interoperation processes across applications and within studios and their different creative processes. So this is, of course, in order to be able to exchange and encode editorial timeline information. As another interchange project, it's very well suited to the open source model. And once again, situating the project inside of the Academy Software Foundation has been a key factor in allowing and encouraging contributions both from a diversity of studios, but also software vendors. And we go. Sorry, just had a little glitch there. And of course, Open Chatting Language joined us quite recently, but as a very mature project, which was already a very active open source project, has continued to make good progress in its new home. The process of actually coming into the foundation from Sony Pictures ImageWorks has, of course, given us the process and governance and resilience to really allow for contributions from a wide variety of players who've previously been consumers of the project, but not so much active contributors. So that's been the real shift of gear with the project adoption. And with that, I will pass over to Rob. And a reminder, of course, please feel free to start posing questions, which we will be able to cover in the discussion session.
Let's see if I have control or not. It's changing around. I can't tell if that's me or somebody else.
Hold on a second. A little glitch here in control passing.
No problem. I'm going to do one more request, David, and see if that works any better.
You should have.
There we go. Perfect. I've got control. Well, allegedly. We'll see. Try another method. There we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about looking ahead and what we're doing next, because our goal here, and we've actually succeeded in our goal of really accelerating open source development, free software development for our community, for the visual effects, animation, and other visually driven, CG driven communities that serve our industry. And I'm not going to spend a lot of detail looking at these specific slides, talking about the number of commits, the number of releases and the contributors, but I did want you to see how active each of these projects has been just in the last year. Some of these projects, like OpenColorIO, were not getting this kind of level of contribution before they joined the Academy Software Foundation. In fact, nowhere near. There was a lot of enthusiasm for it. There was a lot of use across the industry because it solves a really important problem, but there wasn't the system in place to allow contributions from a wide variety of contributors. And Autodesk, who has invested a lot in the new version of OpenColorIO, it wasn't even clear how they could get their code into the shipping version of OpenColorIO, or if they needed to branch it or needed to just provide a whole nother solution to the industry. And I'm so pleased to see the community coming together and contributing, as you can see, in a huge way to that project. OpenQ as well. And when we're talking about this number of lines changed in a year, this is a lot of effort that is going into these packages, as you can see. Not just from a single contributor here. There are a lot of lines coming from one, but in terms of level of commit, there's a lot of people contributing, which is fantastic. OpenEXR, a project that, of course, near and dear to my heart, the one that inspired me to get into open source, watching how OpenEXR had succeeded in the industry, but a project that hadn't had a lot of love in the last few years. It was getting some security patches, but that was about it. As you can see, a lot more work in the last year, 409 commits just in the last 12 months. OpenTimelineIO, again, we're seeing contributors very actively participating in this project, and not just from Pixar or unknown studios. So we're seeing this from multiple studios, which is what we want to see. Open shading language has been long developed very actively. You can see Larry Gritz continues to be the top contributor to that package. That's not a surprise. It's only been in the Academy Software Foundation for a couple of months, but it is fantastic to see more people able to contribute and have a path to contributing to this in a new way. So we want to focus now on how we can bring the most value to you as people who are either already contributing, already part of the Academy Software Foundation, or maybe you're here today kind of checking out what it is that we're doing. Where's the catch? There isn't a catch whether you are a member company in the Academy Software Foundation and you're supporting it with engineering and you're supporting it with money, or you're not. All the software is free for you. It's free for you to participate in. It's free for you to contribute to. It's free for you to use according to the licensing, but all the licenses are very permissive. So it's all free, but the reason so many of those companies that we are very, very grateful to for contributing engineering resources and money to making the Academy Software Foundation successful, the reason that all of us have chosen to be a part of this is because it's so much more efficient for us to solve some of these problems together than if we had to solve them one at a time. And you can see the level of collaboration, the level of efficiency that we're achieving in the Academy Software Foundation today. And this is just after 2 years. So we still have more growth potential ahead of us. It's actually very, very exciting. So now we want to talk with you. There's 122 of us here. And as Daniel and Emily pointed out, please feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen. But I'm curious, where has the Academy Software Foundation delivered the most value to you? Effectively, where have we been successful so far? And then the next question is going to be, where can we deliver more value? Or what would create more value for you? But just go to that URL at the top on your phone or on your device, pollev.com/ASWF. And you can pop in a response and it should show up on the screen. And then if you go to that website and you see somebody's input, you can also upvote other people's suggestions. So you can kind of second someone's thoughts. So I'm going to just hop in there and make sure it's all working. I see one. That's a good sign. And we can start talking about these actually as they come up. And Daniel's here, so. And we are starting to see the responses pour in, which is great.
This is really helpful because it's hard for us sometimes to see the forest for the trees. And there's been a lot that's gone into putting the foundation together. But as we discussed before, briefly, we're at a time, unexpectedly, with COVID-19, where we have to look again at a lot of things and how we do things. And it's a great time to have the feedback of the community. So thank you for everyone who's typing frantically at the moment. That information is very helpful to us, to the board, to the tech.
Daniel, do you want to jump in and chat at all about the build system and what the current state of the CI system is, just because it came up towards the top here while other comments are coming in?
That's a good hook indeed. Yes. So firstly, I'll refer everyone to a short session that's happening a little later in the day, I think in an hour and a half, where we'll be going into the CI system and the CI working group in a little bit more depth. But essentially, we have been able to, with the resources of the TAC and projects, and also the participation of some very active other members, been able to take what all of the projects have been doing in different ways, usually inside of the studios that originated the projects, and move that out into shared, open, modern build CI and support, including testing. That's obviously a very good thing in terms of the modernity and capabilities of those systems. So I think in almost all cases, we've extended the range of support that the project CI systems offer in terms of platform support, in terms of its ability to perform static analysis and other kinds of processes, not just simple build and test. And of course, making the testing process, crucially making the testing process of CI visible to all contributors rather than just those that are situated inside of the walled garden where the project might otherwise be nominally hosted. So yes, please, if you have further interest there, please either follow the CI working group via the Academy's Slack channel or mailing lists. And as with all of our working groups and the TAC itself, and indeed all of our projects, we encourage open participation. Your interest and your expertise is very welcome.
Great. Thank you very much for highlighting these things. I think the top one on this list that people are describing as where the Academy Software Foundation has provided value in terms of keeping projects alive and contributable. I agree with that. That was certainly a major goal. As we looked at the state of open source just over 2 years ago, as we were diving into this and seeing how we could help, the fact that that came up top does mean we are addressing a real problem, which is really good. And some of these other things are very, very helpful. I think it's interesting. We see legal licensing framework for contribution about, half as popular as the top one. And I think that's possibly something for us to think about in the future. We're certainly very focused on that problem. We've also taken a fairly light-handed approach. There is some good uniformity, a better uniformity across the projects, but not complete uniformity across the projects today. And that's an interesting one to look at. But it is nice to see it up there as well. So yeah, I really appreciate all of your thoughts here. And we will be taking this back to our TAC and the rest of the teams as we look at this, as we consider our plans for the future. But it is great to see these areas that are moving forward well. So now, where are the things, how can we bring more value? How can the Academy Software Foundation create more value for you? And one of the, just to keep in mind as you're filling this one out, as you're coming up with ideas, as we've continued to increase our membership, our member companies, that provides us engineering resources, it also provides funding. So we can use that funding for various things. You'll hear a little bit more about that in the D&I program, how we anticipate being able to fund that. We have lots of ideas about how we can move forward, but part of it is, most of it is going to be driven by the community, where you direct us to focus our efforts where we can bring the most value, for sure. So I'll give this a minute. I'll fill out a couple myself. I love seeing attracting diverse engineering talent to the motion picture industry. I think we do sit in a very unique position to be able to do that. I think the accessibility of this, our ability to find talent that we as an industry have not been able to find or not have traditionally been very good at finding. I think as an industry, we're missing some of the top talent out there. And our ability to stand in that gap and attract that kind of diverse engineering talent would be a huge thing that we can play. And I think we can play that role as a software foundation, as the Academy Software Foundation. I think we can play that role in a way that really complements some of the initiatives that many of our member companies are also doing internally. When I look at the investment Disney makes in the Academy Software Foundation, it's actually quite efficient. It's a very nominal contribution for a lot of value. And I think that especially if we can add a lot of value in this area, I think that would be a really good story.
I'd like to see them mention providing more adoption guidance for smaller studios.
Yeah.
In fact, prior to COVID, we were looking at our second year, and we had in our plan to focus on the smaller studio, and we will come back to that at some point. But I'd be very interested to hear about from the smaller studios here in suggestions of what we can do, or in the QA session afterward about your perception of the foundation and how we can help you, the studios that are doing a lot of work in our industry, the smaller studios, very innovative, also very busy. And so your efforts and your money is of great value, and your time. So how can the foundation help you? What do we need to do? How do we need to evolve to serve, from our point of view, the whole community, and that includes the smaller studios.
I might, this is maybe a good challenge for us in terms of using some of the other mechanisms that we have for questions and answers, but might encourage people who have highlighted the official binary builds point there to add some more aspects to that in the Q&A section or in the chat. Curious there whether those requests are coming largely for Mac and Windows platforms, or for Linux as well. And secondly, whether that is an interest in essentially components and packages along the lines of sort of individual elements, or looking for sort of larger integrated environments for the whole set of sort of tools, the VFX reference platform in binary form, essentially.
Yeah, and feel free, if the Q&A format, which is a nice one for asking questions, but if that doesn't work, feel free to chat us in the chat. You can chat just to the panelists, or you can chat to everybody in the room. It's a good sized group, but it's still less than 100, or it's 131 of us, including the panelists. So feel free to just use that chat if that is a helpful way to communicate back on that. We've had a lot of discussion about data set provision, providing data sets, and we think that this could be a very useful mechanism, just like in the rest of the open source code licensing. If we had a common licensing scheme that people could know they could donate data to, and it could be housed by the Academy Software Foundation, whether that's for machine learning, or whether that's for render testing, or other sort of data set test data sets that sometimes are quite significant. We've seen some examples where Walt Disney Animation has open sourced some very large data sets that have gotten a lot of use in the industry, especially in research. So that is something we've talked about, but we have not yet started that project. So that is an interesting thing to see. I like seeing that high on this list. It's definitely something that I think we could bring some real value to.
And I'll chime in too, because I'm seeing, a lot about the increasing learning materials and accessible resources. And we'll talk about that some in the D&I session, but that is a big goal for us as well, because, that is a way to help attract diverse talent. And I will say that a lot of the projects are already working on this, but that is an area where we could definitely use help. And it's an easy way to start trying to get involved with the foundation. You don't necessarily have to be very technical to do that. So, if that's something you might be interested in helping out with, please feel free to reach out to me, to any of the projects on Slack. All of our communities are very welcoming and would welcome help in that.
And I'll go ahead and answer Satish's question. I hope I said your name properly, or at least close. The question is there any plans for some shared USD data sets, production quality data sets for USD? So we've discussed it. We've talked about how we would implement that, and there are some good examples inside of the Linux Foundation where that has been done successfully in other domains. So we have a mechanism that we could use for that, but we haven't actually gotten that first project off the ground. We've discussed a human data set, but that's a pretty changeable data set, meaning the kind of data people are looking for in that space changes pretty rapidly because all the research is happening quickly. And we had talked about a couple of heavy render sets that could be useful as well for researchers. So if you have interest in that project, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us because that could be the difference between that specific project getting off the ground in that area or not. But this would be a good time for us to look at that for sure. Oh, and Nick just highlighted in the chat, Nick Cannon, who is a CTO over at Walt Disney Animation. He said the USD version of the Moana Island scene is coming soon. So that is a fun thing to know.
And then we have a question from Fran Benjamin. Definitely need a good open source assets for testing that everything is set up. Maybe some assets could come from the Smithsonian Institute.
Yeah, I'm interested in how Fran is imagining that. I could totally see that. There's a lot of amazing data the Smithsonian Institute has made available and has licensed very freely. So we could certainly imagine some applications for that. I guess what we have to figure out is what part we would be bringing to that specifically, whether we'd be digitizing some things that are viewed from multiple angles and creating 3D models from it, or whether or not, whether you're just looking for like some nice clean assets that you can test pipelines with. It'd be interesting to talk to you more about that. Perhaps chime in the chat if you wanted to follow up on that one, Fran. Let me just, this is fantastic. I really appreciate this input. I love to see that we're looking that in this group right now, the top thing on everybody's mind is attracting diverse talent to the motion picture industry. And I feel that pressure as well. And I think we're in a very, very good spot to help enable that. That is a great segue to the 1 o'clock session that starts in just under 20 minutes. Because that team has some fantastic ideas. There's a ton of enthusiasm and there's a lot of support from everybody in the Academy Software Foundation to help enable that in everything we do. So I'm excited to see that. And then the fact that the VFX Reference Platform is top on the list is great too. Getting all those projects aligned is a big job, but we can definitely help with that. And there's a lot of enthusiasm for that as well.
I'll add as well, I'll add that on the VFX Reference Platform engagement, that's something, of course, that is already happening in various ways. We have some sort of shared membership and liaison in that group across the two sets of activity. And one of the goals and indeed the outcomes of the CI system that we have developed is, of course, to provide concrete, workable recipes for the specifications that the VFX Reference Platform actually encodes. As a result, we've moved from not only capturing the sort of currently and historically established VFX Reference Platform editions, but we've also been able to use the CI and its underlying Docker build system to validate the reference platform proposals, and that activity has actually happened in the latest iteration of the reference platform, and indeed sort of allowed us to troubleshoot some of the combinations and other elements of the platform. I'll put a hook in again, of course, for both the CI working group session later in the day, and of course the VFX Reference Platform is also having a session within the Open Source Days program.
Great. So we will get to a couple more questions in a minute. Continue to throw those in there if you would like on the questions area. Just in terms of how you can get involved, if you're not involved already, you can jump in and contribute to an existing project anytime. So there's a list of 6 or 7 bullets there of different ways you can jump in right away. And there's room for people with various level of technical proficiency as well. It does not just require you to be a hard code coder to be able to contribute. So there's lots of roles to be able to contribute to an existing project. The TAC, as we've highlighted, as you can see in our charts, it's probably the beating heart of the Academy Software Foundation. And you can see some specific needs we have on the Technical Advisory Committee, but that is really the group that Daniel runs is really where all the action happens. The rest of us are here to support that and to amplify everything they're doing. And then most recently, the new working groups, the CI working group, the Diversity Inclusion working group, Python and USD working groups. These are all areas where you can dive in and contribute in many different ways. I just want to explicitly mention everyone is welcome in the Diversity and Inclusion group, even if you are not part of a minority community or you don't identify with a minority community, of course you are welcome to be part of the D&I working group. We need everybody, we'd love everybody to be involved in that. And it's not just that working group's job to help solve that within the Academy Software Foundation. We think of it as all of our jobs, but this working group is making some fantastic recommendations and setting us up and giving some really good ideas for how we can proceed. And I'll leave this up as we're diving into our last questions. Lots of different ways to get in touch with us. Of course, there's the website where you can find links to all of this. But these are the various things, so you can pick your favorite method to be in touch with people on the Academy Software Foundation. So we'll take a couple questions if there are some, and then we'll give everybody a couple minutes to get ready for the next session as well.
I think this one's maybe more of a comment than a question, but from Morin, and I apologize if I'm butchering the name, but related to the data sets for machine learning, if studios are not willing or hesitant to contribute the data, at least the trained models probably can be open sourced.
It's a very good point. Yes, I think that's a really good point. And I think, you know, it's interesting if we're looking to host trained models, that could be something we could look at as well. And we could expedite that if that was easier to get done. So I'm open to that for sure. I'm sure the TAC would be open to looking at that, I mean.
And then Stephen McKenzie asked, is there a place that can be gone to understand which projects, Academy Software Foundation projects, are looking for which kinds of development help? So that developers can better evaluate, you know, how they can help in the most constructive way. And Jean-Francois pointed out we do have a good first issues. Most of our projects are encouraged to tag those.
Yeah, so if you're already familiar with GitHub and you go through the GitHub issues lists, you hopefully will find some good first issues tags in there that you might be able to jump right into. That said, feel free to jump on any of the Slack channels or in any of the mailing lists. And if you were to highlight a couple of things that you're good at, I'm sure there would be several responses from people that said, oh, here's a place you could contribute right away. Or if you did that on the OpenEXR mailing list and there wasn't anything directly for you, the people that hang out on that mailing list also know something about some of our other projects, and they might be able to say, oh, your GPU skills are going to be really relevant coming soon over an OpenVDB or whatever might get announced tomorrow morning. So definitely feel free to chime in with any specific questions if you have interest or expertise. And then, of course, if you can't reach anybody there, just jump into a TAC meeting or jump on the TAC mailing list and say, here, I'd love to help. I've got a few hours and I could do this. There is plenty of work to do. We'd love that kind of request.
Seconded.
Yeah, and I'd say the TAC meetings are open to everybody. You do not have to be a TAC member to join, but that's a great way to find out what all the projects are working on and kind of maybe what's on the roadmap, because each project will give an update as well as each working group. So I think that's a very good first step. And there's also a TAC channel on our Slack. Then Anonymous, is Apple actually still an Academy Software Foundation member? Because they're not on the member page. And I can answer this one that yes, they are still a premier member. There are some logo guidelines from Apple that prohibit us from putting their logo on our website, but yes, they are, and they are actively involved in many of our projects and on our TAC.
That's great. Well, since we have the 1 o'clock meeting, since we've gotten through most of the Q&A, and since we've got so much great input, I wonder if we should wrap this one up, giving everybody a couple of minutes and really highlight that D&I discussion that's coming up at 1 o'clock. If you're able to take part in that, we would welcome you for sure. And a special thanks to Dan and Emily, who have done, as you can see, a ton of work to make today happen and to get us to this point. And Dan's leadership of the TAC has been exceptional, now doing that for 2 years, which is a really big job. I think we may have convinced him to do this by telling him that it wasn't that big of a job, yet he has done a heroic job managing it all. So thank you very much, Dan. And Emily, thank you very much for you and the team's work to put this seminar together over the next couple, this morning and the next couple of days. It's been fantastic already. So thank you very, very much.
I second that, and I also want to mention John Murtick, who's working in the background, not with us on this panel, but is our director of product, who's doing an amazing job to make the foundation run at many level. So I want to thank him as well. And
Thank you all.
we can call it a wrap.
Yes,
Yep.
we'll see
And
you in the
give a
next
few
session.
minutes for people to prepare for the next one. Thank you, panelists. And thank you, attendees. Thank you for your feedback. We're going to take it in good consideration. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.